Hello team and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. Ukraine War Frontline update for the 8th of January 2024. I am asking you a question first as to whether for those who've watched a lot of my stuff before, is the picture better quality? I've changed some settings. There seems to be a bit of an audio glitch possibly, so please let me know if there's a weird kind of sort of echo thing going on with my audio, but also whether my little ugly face in the corner is clearer. Bad luck, guys. And whether the general picture is clearer. There's some changes in OBS. People are saying you need to get a better webcam. My webcam's fine. There's nothing wrong with my webcam. It is perfectly decent. It is just the interface that changes the recording quality, and which is OBS, and I just need to get the right settings. So all this time I may have just had the wrong settings. Anyway, if you haven't seen my maps before, please check out the key to what the lines mean on the screen at the moment. We'll go to the map now, and as you can see, we have a myriad of colors, which is good. Well, a handful of colors, which is good news for the Ukrainians. So it's not all red dark pins there, red and maroon pins, which is good news. Okay, we're going to go to the northeast sector, but to start with, we'll go to the Institute for the Study of War. I haven't dipped into this ISW for some time. It's the American military think tank. They say Russian mill bloggers claim that Russian forces captured several positions near Mykhailivka and recently made significant advances southwest and west of Crimea near the Serebryensky forest area, Torsk-Terny, Yampolivka. But ISW has not observed visual confirmation of these claims. Okay, so the claims are some gains in Mykhailivka up here. We'll go there in a second, but also here and here. These are all gains that we have seen posted, or at least the ones down near the forest and Crimea are ones that we've seen Suryat maps talk about over the last 3 or 4 days, but the ISW is saying they've not seen confirmation of that. As far as Mykhailivka is concerned, by Kupiansk, there are some claims from the Russians that they've made some gains in that area, but yesterday actually we saw Suryat map, was it Suryat? No, it was Andrew Perpetua actually say that the Ukrainians have pushed the Russians back in this little woodland area there, that little copse that the Ukrainians had, if not taken back, they had pushed the Russians out of. As far as this whole sort of front line is concerned, although there's a lot of positional fighting, the only thing to be said is that Andrew Perpetua has got a rejig there, as according to JR, who's done my mapping. Thanks again, JR, legend. I'm so busy today as well. I've got a live stream that I'm doing a little bit later, plus I've got to finish writing an article. Plus, just as a random aside, I've just edited and published the second edition of a book on obsessive compulsive disorder, and I'm presently editing the Spanish version of that. So, I'm not that busy. Anyway, so January the 7th, rejig, probably way sooner it happened. So this is the acceptance that the Russians have moved forward there, but it's not that they would have done that in the last 24 hours, but actually that they've been controlling that field area for some time. So that's a rejig in the Novoselivska area, somewhere that we haven't heard a lot from for an awful long time. Anyway, could well be a lot of activity going on here. This is where the ISW has said there is activity there, as according to Russian mill bloggers, but the ISW has not seen any confirmation of that. Well, Andrew Perpetua is confident enough to say that this whole area is now under control of the Russians, which was originally claimed by Suryat maps. They have a larger, more, they've probably got a few larders there as well, racing about, a larger, more charitable interpretation of the mapping for the Russians in that particular area. But it's been stasis there for a couple of days, and that is good news. There are claims also in this forest area that the Russians have made gains, and we saw that with Suryat maps, and that's what ISW is referring to as well. Then when we come down to Bakhmut, and this is really significant, I think when we look at the ISW, right, and we see this here, so these 3 paragraphs, right, refer to 1, 2, 3 paragraphs there, refer to Bakhmut, Avdiivka, Marinka, and Mykhailivka. In other words, the largest paragraph here is Marinka and Mykhailivka. Avdiivka gets a relatively small paragraph, and Bakhmut has the smallest paragraph I've seen. Normally they have like a 3-paragraph section on its own. this is testament to the fact that it really has become positional in Bakhmut. Russian and Ukrainian forces continued positional engagements near Bakhmut. It really has stalled. That might have a lot to do with the weather. The weather is a lot worse at the moment, a lot colder, a lot of snow. That could really affect drone usage. It could affect just maneuvers in general. So there is that. But nonetheless, things have got a lot quieter, particularly in this northern area where we haven't seen any further Russian expansion there. And indeed, around Klishchivka to the south, there is a little bit of movement, as according to Syriac maps and deep state maps. In fact, all the mappers agree that the Russians controlled this area. Andrew Perpetua had that previously. That is north of Klishchivka and indeed northeast of the trench area that is still contested somewhat. The mappers disagree on that. So a bit of a game for the Russians there. But other than that, nothing else really to say about Bakhmut. I've not highlighted anything in the ISW. So we'll move on to Avdiivka, where we have a little bit of a mix of what's going on. Okay, let's go to... Oh, and by the way, I did forget to say, war monitors claim that Ukrainian forces have repelled 3 large-scale assaults on the town of Terny today. That was yesterday, destroying significant amounts of manpower and equipment. So sorry to go back here, but I did forget. But there could be some rather a large number of lost Russian pieces of equipment in that area, as the Russians did try, according to War Monitor, 3 attacks and they appeared to have failed. Anyway, going back to the Avdiivka area, we'll pop into the Institute for the Study of War that says Ukrainian Avdiivka city military administration head Barabash reported yesterday that Russian forces are conducting assault operations from all directions towards Avdiivka for a 3rd consecutive day, and that Russian forces conduct several dozen airstrikes per day near Avdiivka. So the aviation strikes are picking up again in this area. It sort of went quiet as the Russians lost the number of planes, and now they are ticking up again. So the Russians attacking all around here, but we have a little bit of a walk back possibly around the southern dachas near the industrial area there. So as JR has put here, it could be corrections for Syriac rather than a counter attack. But some gains, as according to both mappers, variously around the dachas near the water treatment plant and across towards Vesely, which is here. It's not marked on the map, weirdly, but nonetheless that is Vesely as far as I remember. So some gains there. Let's go in to look at some of the Avdiivka posts. No report says fighting also continues north and northeast of Avdiivka, and based on geolocated footage, the Russians have made some territorial gains in the Dacha area, although most of the area remains in a grey zone. Ukrainian troops have slightly less area fully under their control. So that is the exact area that we're talking about, just north of this this quarry, now lake, I think. So that's the area that he's talking about, and Andrew Perpetua agrees that there are some gains there, but Syriac Maps has more gains for the Russians further to the east, down into those fields there. And then Syriac Maps really goes down to Marinka. That's the end of any claims about that. So they don't mention this area there. It's just a correction from the map by the looks of it. And then some gains here in the Pervomaisky area. Actually, is that Pervomaisky? Sorry, that's not Marinka, that's Pervomaisky there. So situation northwest of Donetsk. As a result of partial withdrawal of Ukrainian troops during the last few days, the Russian army has made some advances south of Pervomaisky. That's pretty much Pervomaisky as it comes into Pisky here. So I think the general, is it not the general cutoff was, it might have been this. Oh no, I thought it was this area that becomes, Pisky. So I think that is technically still Pervomaisky. This is the cutoff there, that road going across the water features. But as you can see, all 3 mappers indicate that the Russians have made some gains here. So they are moving forward there. This, again, is one of the places that I don't think is too worrying for me. Like, the Russians have been further up here before. They've been pushed back. I don't think it really gives the Russians too much in terms of tactical advantage or gains. The worry would be Novelsky. It's one of these places, a bit like Pobieda down here, that stops the Russians from doing a larger encirclement. So I think that is useful, and it would worry me if the Ukrainians lost that area. But the depths of Pervomaisky here, I don't think it really matters that much, and you're going to expect we will be expecting the Russians to make gains in this period up until, I guess, the next counter offensive for the Ukrainians, whenever that may be, and that may be an awful long way away. They might want to wait even longer this time to gather the forces and the resources that they need. And then coming on down further to the south, we have Marinka and Mykhailivka. The ISW states of this area, geolocated footage published on the 7th of January indicates that Russian forces marginally advanced in both places. Let's now look at some of that geolocation. So this is Marinka, where we have the Russians being targeted by Ukrainian drones here inside the ruins of a church. So let's have a look at Marinka, where we've recently seen the Russians advance to the north of the town in this agricultural settlement area there. We'll see where the Russians are hanging out, and that would be to sort of confirm those gains, I guess, that we saw yesterday. So the ISW is confirming geolocated gains. Of course, not on the mapping today, because we actually had updated that last night due to JR's updating and Surat maps. All the mappers, I think, showing those gains yesterday. So good to see confirmation of mapping changes. And then it's kind of moving on to Mykhailivka from there, and we can go to the ISW to say Kremlin-affiliated Russian mill blogger claimed that Russian forces are attempting to advance to Mykhailivka, which we kind of already guessed, in order to achieve the operational goal of capturing Kurakova. So as we come down to the south, past Pobieda, which I said is an important little settlement, we can see Mykhailivka here under a lot of threat, but the colours are looking good for the pro-Ukrainians. The claims are that the Russians are... Oh no, sorry. That's actually Marinka they're talking about. I was getting myself confused. So Mykhailivka then goes on towards Kurakova, and that's really what they want. That's supposedly a fairly important town, operationally speaking. It's on that road that comes down there, and all of these towns on the way are something of a buffer. So the more that Ukraine cede the Russians in terms of these towns going along the road, it's not so much that they have individual importance themselves, intrinsic value. The value they have is, stopping the Russians moving further to the west and then eventually on to Kurakova. But of course, this road coming down through Pobieda, I would say, is important. Konstantinivka is important because of its because of the road that goes to the south and Vuhledar. So all of these, it's like I said before, it's like a big dominoes around there. Anyway, moving now on to Mykhailivka, you can see it's a little bit different there. The ISW doesn't really say too much about Mykhailivka, but other sources do. Here we have no reports saying, although Ukrainian troops prevent Russian units from entering the city, both in the south and the east, the Russians have made some progress in the south. Geolocated images show that the Russian troops are present somewhat south of the city, and that would indicate this kind of area here. But it's really interesting. You see that, Surat Maps is having the Russians pushed right back and out of both the cemetery and the industrial area, and they were kind of only on the edge, I think, of this agricultural area there where it had been walked back previously. So the Russians are being pushed back, it seems, by the Ukrainians, as according to Surat Map. So the Ukrainian army recaptured the cemetery and the cotton building south of Mykhailivka following the failure of the Russian army to enter the town. This is really, really significant and shows you, I think, that Mykhailivka does have that importance that I was just talking about for stopping this road, Konstantinivka being taken, this road being interdicted, and then Vuhledar falling, and that then having an impact on whether the Ukrainians can hit Mariupol with HIMARS and other sort of munitions and activity that the Ukrainians can prosecute in that area. Places like Volnovakha here being vulnerable to artillery. So if you push the Ukrainians back and take this road, then they'll be operating out of here, and things are just more difficult to strike down into this occupied territory there. So this is an important neck of the woods. Konstantinivka is important, and thus Mykhailivka is important, and the Ukrainians recognize that. And even though the whole place is nothing but kind of rubble anymore, as you can see from drone imagery that's coming out of Mykhailivka, it has a value, an extrinsic value of the other places to the south and to the west. Another piece of geolocated footage that the ISW suggests an advance for the Russians is that the Ukrainians are striking Russian soldiers in this geolocated position. Okay, let's plug that in and see what that tells us. But of course, again, with geolocations, they are really useful, but they can go out of date. They can suggest that troops are there, but they were only there momentarily. It doesn't suggest that it had robust control. So here's a prime example. So ISW would be right in saying, right, the Russians are here, and that suggests that they've made lots of advances there. But then the timing is really important. So they released this geolocated footage is coming from the 7th of January, referring to something from the 27th of December there, and then geolocations, is that when did that take place? Is that now out of date? And the suggestion from Surat Maps, so that's a pro-Russian source here, is that claim is now out of date. So that geolocation suggests that the Russians are there, but arguably the Russians are actually quite a long way from there at the moment. And that is the claim coming from both Surat Maps and indeed Deep State Maps that shows an even greater Ukrainian counterattack, pushing the Russians right back down to the south and into these fields. Remember, these are the areas where the Russians have lost huge amounts of equipment in their attacks along these flat and open fields, particularly in this area. Obviously, there are some river features around there. But really, I think significant pushback from the Ukrainians there in that area, if that is indeed true. And since mappers from both sides of the aisle agree that something like that has happened, then we can imagine it probably has. It'll be interesting to see what Andrew Perpetua does in his next mapping change. Then when we come further to the south and to the west, we can see there are no changes to the front line whatsoever at all. So you go to the ISW and there's not a lot to mention here. Just positional fighting taking place in, look, this is Robotyne Mykhailivka. Velika Novosilka there. Velika Novosilka. Oh no, Robotyne is down here. But even then, it says positional engagement. So there's not really much to report. A Russian mill blogger claimed that engagements in Western Zaporizhia are tactical, despite Ukrainian forces' transition to maneuver defense, and that Russian forces continue to lack comprehensive support against Ukrainian drones in the area. So some moaning about Russian ability to counteract drones. I've been doing a lot of drone conversation in the last 24 hours. Tochny, we talked about a lot on their podcast or video cast that the Russians might have advantages in drones in certain areas, but actually that's not to say that in other areas on the battlefield, and we've talked about Krynky before, but possibly around Robotyne, as according to Russian sources themselves, the Russians are struggling with some of their drone capabilities there. Talking about Krynky, there's still lots of footage coming out of Russian losses in that area. Special Kherson Cat has just brought this out today, saying, today the Russians made another attempt to attack Krynky, Kherson region. Various sources claim that a total of 5 Russian tanks and several BTRs were destroyed or damaged. The video shows a detonation of one of the attacking Russian tanks. PS, for some reason lately I often see comments that my videos are not loading. Yep, my video's not loading there for me either. But and that is right in the building area of Krynky, right? So the Russians are trying to attack, trying to squeeze the Ukrainians right out of this last remaining sort of bridgehead area. It's difficult to know exactly what the Ukrainians control there. Probably only really, most of this will be grey zone, and the Ukrainians will really only have robust control over the buildings really on the northern side of Krynky. But the Russians are continually trying to attack and losing, as mentioned there, lots of equipment in so doing, and they've lost maybe somewhere between 60 and 200 pieces of equipment in this larger area. It's just been a bit of an equipment graveyard for the Russians, and there's more evidence to suggest that continues to be the case. There you go. Anyway, thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, and share. Drop into the live chat I'm having later today. That's 6 o'clock UK time. I'm just hoping I get back from ice skating with one of my boys in time for that. Fingers crossed. But yeah, in the meantime, take care and speak soon.